How robust is the Snowball Earth hypothesis? Well, g'day and welcome back to Creation Geology for Beginners. Now, if you have been following along, this is part 5 in our series on the Proterozoic, which itself is a part of a greater video series on historical geology. Of course, in the last 2 videos, we were taking a closer look at the Snowball Earth hypothesis, which we'll finish off in this video. Now, you'll find the links in the description for all 4 videos. In this video, we are going to discuss striated pavements and dropstones. Now, it's been said that dropstones in and of themselves, without any other supporting evidence, often act as the sole criterion upon which one adopts a glacial interpretation. And that's because only a few processes can account for their emplacement. A dropstone is, as the name suggests, a rock that has dropped into a fine-grained sediment like mud or silt. And this is mostly why dropstones are interpreted in terms of glacial processes. Essentially, as a glacier moves out over an ocean or a lake, the rocks that are entrained within the base of the glacier drop into the mud or silt below. This can cause the laminations that experience the impact of the rock to bend downward. As more sediment is dropped over the portion of the rock protruding from the underlying bed, the rock is buried in fresh layers that drape over the rock. Other objects have been known to carry and drop rocks, such as those dislocated from the root systems of floating trees. But of course, there were no trees, at least not from a conventional perspective, during Neoproterozoic time. So how did these outsized rocks get into these fine-grained Neoproterozoic sediments if we're not talking about a glacial origin? Well, as it turns out, sediment gravity flows can duplicate dropstone emplacement. Depending on the kind of sediment gravity flow, some of the very large clasts within the flow, which are usually restricted to the lowest most layer due to the forces of gravity, can be lifted up into the flow's finer sediments thanks to the work of other forces that work against the forces of gravity. Now, these kinds of flows tend to stop suddenly, which causes all the sediment in the flow to literally freeze, effectively suspending the oversized rocks in finer sediment. Now, interestingly, these kinds of rocks are often found surrounded by bent layers. And this means that bent layers can form around a rock that is entrained in a sediment gravity flow. Now consider these 2 outsized floating clasts that were trapped when a sediment gravity flow suddenly froze. Notice that the laminations above this clast and below this one are bent. If the rock was not dropped into the sediment, it is simply called a loanstone. Now, to be sure, some dropstone examples are a little more challenging. Consider this clast that is sitting in sediment with its long axis pointing upward. Note also the pointy end that appears to pierce the lower bent layers. By itself, this example could be put forward to compellingly argue for a glacial origin. Yet this apparent dropstone is found in other layers that, according to the authors of this paper, were deposited in fast-moving sediment gravity flows. The tan layers, along with all of the clasts embedded within them, were supposedly deposited by ice-rafted debris, which accumulated slowly from sediment fallout. Yet the same authors then go on to say that the grey layers were deposited rapidly from turbidity currents, which are a type of sediment gravity flow. Now, personally, I think all of these layers could be interpreted in terms of sediment gravity flows. Now, some other mechanisms that might explain emplacement of dropstones are outrunners and volcanism. Outrunners, as the name suggests, are rocks that outrun a rapidly decelerating sediment gravity flow. Now, given Newton's first law, loose rocks found at the top of the sediment gravity flow will roll, slide, or even bounce forward, potentially catapulting them onto the surface of an adjacent sediment gravity flow that was deposited at some time earlier. Now, there is also the possibility of volcanic ejecta. Material ejected from volcanoes can travel long distances and is known to account for dropstones. As it turns out, many Neoproterozoic diamictites contain discrete ash layers like this. And as they say, where there's smoke, there's fire. If we have ash beds, why not volcanic ejecta? Now, before moving to striated pavements, I want to take a few moments and discuss these ash beds. According to these authors, all of this material is ice rafted debris that has fallen to the ocean floor, including the volcanic ash. But here's the rub. How does a discrete and very pure layer of ash get deposited under an ice sheet? Remember, the oceans are completely covered with kilometer-thick ice. Now, the authors believe that the ash was flushed through the ice in a moulin. That's a natural melt shaft that vertically or near vertically penetrates the thickness of the glacier. Yet this would mean that ash would first of all remain in discrete and pure layers for who knows how long, sitting on top and within a glacier. And then we must believe that these kilometer-thick ice sheets had natural shafts that penetrated the entire thickness of the glacier, keeping the ash pure as it made its way to the ocean. And finally, we must believe that the flushed out ash continued to retain its purity as it fell to the ocean floor without getting mixed up into the other falling debris. And it's for this reason that many skeptics believe ash layers represent evidence of open oceans. These naysayers accept a much more moderate view called slushball Earth, which is contrary to the Snowball Earth theory. Okay, so now let's have a look at striated pavements. Striated pavements, as the name suggests, are hard rock surfaces that are often covered with deep parallel to subparallel scratches or gouges, typically traveling in one general direction. So essentially, as a glacier moves over the land, it picks up rock debris of all different shapes and sizes. And this means that the bottom of the glacier acts like sandpaper. And so as the glacier moves over hard rock, the entrained rock debris mechanically cuts down into the rock surface, producing scratches. So when a geologist finds a striated pavement in the rock record that is associated with a diamictite, she might interpret the pavement in terms of glacial processes. However, it is well known that sediment gravity flows also produce striated pavements. Remember, sediment gravity flows are mass movements of sedimentary rocks, sand and mud downhill. The rocks entrained in these flows can easily scratch hard rock surfaces in the same way as rocks entrained in ice. And this is especially true if high viscosity sediment gravity flows move cohesively, that just means as a unit, down very shallow slopes at low velocities. Sediment gravity flows can even produce scratched surfaces over long distances. Now consider this paper that documents the existence of 9 kilometer long striations after the pavement was overrun by a massive submarine landslide. That striated pavements can be formed by various types of sediment gravity flows is an attested fact that has been documented in a number of published papers. Okay, so let's now test your comprehension. I'm going to ask you a question and then answer the question almost immediately. So make sure to pause the video after each question so you can attempt an answer. All right, first of all, what is a striated pavement? Well, a striated pavement, it's a hard rock surface that is often covered with deep parallel to subparallel gouges, typically traveling in one general direction. All right, what is a moulin? Well, it's a vertical or near vertical shaft that is found in glaciers. All right, what is the name of a rock found suspended in finer sediments? And the answer is, well, it depends. If it is dropped into the sediment, it is called a dropstone. If it is the result of forces within a sediment gravity flow that sort of pushes the rock up into the finer sediment, it is called a loamstone. So if you got that, good job. All right, what is a sediment gravity flow? Well, that is where sedimentary rocks, sand, and mud move downhill under the influence of gravity. And remember, sediment gravity flows can occur both in air and in water. True or false? Can rocks in sediment gravity flows scratch the hard rock surface over which the sediment moves? And the answer is true. Okay, so that's all from me, Ken Coulson here at Creation Geology for Beginners. Don't forget to hit that like button, pound the subscribe button as well. Look, if you would like to pray, I always appreciate that. Please pray for me for Creation Unfolding Ministries. There is a link in the description if you'd like to give, and we will see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.